I have seen hundreds of different VASPs and crypto startups, and only a few remain.
And let's start with a trending topic, MiCA. Can you please check our AML procedures whether they are MiCA compliant, or can you check our AML KYC process whether they are MiCA compliant? Maybe it will disappoint you. MiCA has very little or maybe zero relevance to AML processes.
Investigation, looking at both pieces of this picture at the same time, it allows you also to do really good FIU reporting.
Then the law does not allow you to work with such a VASP.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you might be joining us from. Thanks for doing so. And this is our first webinar together with AML Bot, but hopefully many more to come. The topic today is for holistic AML risk management for VASPs in particular. So the objective is to provide you with an opportunity to understand all the different elements that are needed to have a strong and sustainable VASP AML program, right? And this is especially important for all of you. And if you're an AML professional, right, understanding all the nuances can be challenging. So our objective is to give you as much information as possible to help you with that. Then if you're a founder, it's very important for you to recognize how to invest in your AML operations, right? So, because it is a crucial part, as guys will be touching on later on, you need to be aware of how and when we allocate these resources for AML programs. And then if you are an investor, even more so to do with the resources and investments, you need to make sure that your investment is safe and that your portfolio of companies are looking at their AML compliance seriously to protect your investment. So without further say or do, let me present our speakers for today. And we have Nico from AML Bot joining us. Nico, can you please just briefly present yourself to the group?
Sure, Clinda. Hi, everyone. I'm Nico Demchuk, and I am a lawyer and compliance specialist at AML Bot. AML Bot is one-stop solution. So our aim is to help companies, especially startups and medium-sized, to cover all of their AML processes, starting from KYC, KYT, but we also do crypto investigations and we do trainings and compliance consulting. Me, myself, I have around 10 years of experience, working half of it in a law firm. Then I was working around 2 years as an AML auditor in Big Four in Luxembourg, and now I'm a happy lawyer working in-house for fintech and regtech startup.
Okay, thanks very much. Now on to you, Faisal.
Thanks so much, Clinta. Hi, everyone. My name is Faisal. I'm the CEO of ComplyTech. I actually started my career as a compliance officer back in 2008. And I've been a compliance officer until 2018 or so. I've worked with multiple types of institutions. 2019 and so on, I've been basically devoting my entire career and experience and all my time to developing regulatory technology. My earliest experience with cryptocurrency was as a compliance officer in 2012 for a cryptocurrency exchange back in the States. And so it's been super interesting for me looking at the compliance in sort of the crypto space all the way from 2011 to now, and really excited to see what goes on forward. I will tell you that when I started, there were not many compliance officers that were into cryptocurrency. I found myself very alone without any resources or anything to actually do. So I envy all of you that are here attending, almost 13 years later, with at least some resources. Hopefully that would help you, manage your AML program. And for those of you that are founders of new VASPs as well, or you've got a startup VASP, it's really important for you all to know how to manage your AML compliance program. I have seen hundreds of different VASPs and crypto startups in the last 15 years, and I've seen only a few remain. So our sincere thought and hope that this webinar, this first of many webinar, can help you all sort of remain and thrive. Now, Before we begin, one quick thing I do want to stress is this. Like, we're in this really beautiful transition period, right? Where you've got essentially the fiat world and people are on-ramping onto cryptocurrency. So hopefully this will be helpful for you. Finally, as a note, ComplyTech is a regulatory technology company. Our customers are banks, EMIs, fintech, VASPs, insurance, FX as well. We essentially automate all the compliance process from onboarding, risk assessment, transaction monitoring. We do all the transaction monitoring for bank payments, card payments, SWIFT payments, SEPA payments. And so we know this is important to a lot of you here, and we're very happy to work with AML Bot on this as well.
Indeed, I certainly echo that. Okay, well, thanks very much for the introduction, guys. Guys, I just want to take you through the agenda for today. Mind you, we're trying to squeeze hours and thousands of text documents into a single hour for this webinar. So yeah, hopefully you find this helpful. We took effort to make this happen for you. So the agenda will be as follows. First, we're going to look at the evolving AML landscape in crypto and traditional finance. Moving on to AML risks in on-ramp and off-ramp services. And then some crucial aspects of AML compliance in general. And of course, key takeaways and recommendations that you can apply practically. And we're going to finish with Q&A session. So if you do have some questions for us, feel free to drop them in the chat. But please note that we won't be answering them during the conversation. And we'll take care of the questions later on. So first of all, we're going to look at the evolving AML landscape in crypto and traditional finance. And we'll start with Nico. We want to hear more about the crypto to get started.
Sure, yeah. Let's set the base with regulation, because this is, in the end of the day, where we should look at when we are thinking about how to set up our AML and compliance process in the company. And let's start with a trending topic, with a hot topic, with a sexy word, MiCA. It's all around the news. Everyone is talking about it because it's going to be fully applicable since 2025. But I still see some kind of misunderstanding because I see requests of when our clients are referring to, can you please check our AML procedures, whether they are MiCA compliant, or can you check our AML KYC process, whether they are MiCA compliant? So here maybe will disappoint you. MiCA has very little or maybe zero relevance to AML processes, because it's a regulation that sets the rule how to apply for a MiCA license that gives you the right to offer crypto asset services, maintain it. Then, of course, there is some protection for investor and consumers, and for regulatory authority, how should they do oversight of licensed crypto asset service providers. And when I look at MiCA, can you please one slide back? And when I look at MiCA, in terms of AML, MiCA has only one requirement, that the applicant for MiCA license should have AML KYC procedures in place. But there is no more details about it, because it is regulated by other regulations and laws, and I will talk about this in the next slide. But about MiCA, so what's about MiCA and why we're still talking about MiCA? First of all, of course, it's a big plus of MiCA that it provides a homogeneous regulation, meaning that a company received one license in one country can passport its services all around the European economic area, and also it provides better consumer and investor protection. So basically sets of rules for companies to apply and receive the license. And when we are talking about AML, and especially those who received MiCA or who are operating in European economic area, what they should have in place, what kind of processes, what are the requirements about customer onboarding, transaction monitoring, then one should look at different regulations. And these are these four main ones that will start be applicable from 2025 and some of those 2027. But if you are an AML professional compliance officer, I urge you actually to look at this regulation. So the first one is the AML regulations. Also, very big plus for crypto business, because as of now, when there is some company who wants to provide the crypto asset services, I don't know, exchange to all around European Economic Area, European Union, still they need to go to each country and check their AML regulations, AML requirements, because it's not a regulation. It's just in EU we have just a directive, EU directive. So it means that every country can have its own peculiarities, specifics, and the business needs to needs to figure out, needs to go to the lawyers, needs to see what they need to comply in France, in the Netherlands, etc. So with the new regulation that we will have, it will start to be applicable 2027. These requirements will be similar all around European Economic Area, and it's a big plus for the business because once you make your processes compliant with this regulation, you can provide your services all around the European Economic Area without actually digging into each specific country. What are the new, what's news and what's important for crypto asset service providers in this regulation that crypto asset service provider will need to do customer due diligence on every client, and also when CASP or VASP interacting with another VASP, they will also need to do due diligence of such VASP. So to say, similar as a corresponding banking relationship, it will be the same when there is an interaction between two VASPs, especially if this VASP is from a different country, not from the European Union. Then not only the customer needs to be a KYC, but also the VASP, whether it's a high-risk VASP, whether you can interact with such a VASP, or if it's not licensed or it doesn't have a good AML KYC processes, then the law does not allow you to work with such a VASP or CASP. Then the second one is the regulations that establish a new EU authority. So now every business is basically supervised by the local authority in each country, but starting from 2025, mid-July, it should be a new authority, EU AML authority, with a seat in Frankfurt. It was already chosen, who will have a direct supervision, not for all companies, but only for a specific ones. There are the criteria that the company needs to provide services in more than 10 countries, or if there is incorporations and branches in more than 7 countries, then it will be under direct supervision of this authority for 3 years, and CASP could be also under it if they comply with such criteria. There is a 6th AML, EU AML Directive. Okay, it's not very important for us, it's already in force. And there is a 4th one, and maybe the most problematic one for crypto asset service provider, because it's about FATF Travel Rule. So starting from 2025, when you make a transfer on behalf of your customers, just to make a transfer is not enough. You will need to also provide information, to receive information about the beneficiary of the transfer, make your own due diligence, and then share information about the initiator of the transfer. And this is one of the most problematic to implement. At the moment, there are many challenges, but we will not dive into it so deep because it's another topic of discussion. So basically, this is a highlight of the new EU AML regulation that are upcoming from the new year, but it's only one part of the story as regulation. The other part actually how you apply such regulation in practice, how you execute such law. And here we can have many different experiences. So I will give the floor to Faisal, who has a hands-on experience working lots of years as a compliance officer, and who can give you a really practical insight whether it's going to be difficult to implement or easy. Faisal, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Nico. Yeah, so one of the interesting things is if you look at our attendees, mostly VASPs, that rely maybe on treasury services, banking services, or crypto services, you really have sort of 2 categories that they're in. They either provide either on-ramp or off-ramp or both, right? So these are service providers that enable the buy and sell, and some of them just do one or the other. Whichever category you're in, one of the things that you'll have to do is enter into a relationship with a banking provider that provides you some type of access to the banking rails, whether that's SEPA, SWIFT, etc. Or you might have a relationship with an acquirer who allows you to deposit or withdraw with credit cards and whatnot. So the reason why you might want to interact with them is because either on the on-ramp, you would need your users to use their current instruments to use that for purchasing cryptocurrency. And on the other end is they might want to designate after they have sold their cryptocurrency, where would they like their funds to be deposited to? This is just the same also if you were working with a prepaid or a BIN sponsor, who's again allowing you different accounts for deposits and withdrawals. That being said, the reason why it's super, super important is because these partners that you'll be working with, whether that's banks, acquirers, BIN sponsors, whichever, they have their own set of very different regulators, right? A lot of times, perhaps even the same FIU or, excuse me, the same central bank or the same supervisory authority might be watching over both the VASP and the regulated institutions or traditional institutions. However, the lens in which they review each is very, very different. So banks, acquirers, and so on, the level of regulation and the level of supervision that they go under is incredibly, incredibly difficult. In fact, it is much, much more than it is for VASPs in almost any other country. As a result, they would require VASPs that they onboard to have very strong AML program management itself. Why? Because a poor AML program management by one of their customers who is a VASP threatens their entire registration and licensing with the regulator. So a bank or an acquirer can potentially lose their licensing and also their access to the different rails. So it's super, super important for you not only to have it so that it protects the relationship of the acquirer you're with, but at the same time just manages your AML program better. So that's a little bit of the brief explanation. Now, the main risk that you're really trying to cover or that your banking partner or your on-ramp provider will want you to cover is a risk that you usually don't see. And by you, I mean the VASPs. So VASPs generally are going to see most of their risk based on the on-chain monitoring data that they get, right? So what type of coins are coming in or where the coins are going based from the data that they use by connecting with AML Bot, for example. But your banking partner and acquire partner doesn't have access to that data. As far as they're concerned, all they see is one of the either IBAN accounts or allocated accounts getting flooded with fiat and then leaving fiat. But they don't have the other side of that story that you have. So the main risk that you as a VASP might have to sort of mitigate is entry risk. So if you're using a credit card, which is a highly reversible instrument, and you're connecting for crypto purchases, you're almost at a high amount of risk because the funds can be easily reversed, right? So it presents a high amount of economic risk. So the acquirer, the one that has given you the access to be able to deposit through credit card, gets the first hit, right? Because they're the ones that are registered with Visa and MasterCard. So they get the first hit. So for them, it's super important that you manage that risk really well because you're the ones that are letting the first buyer and first customer in. Same thing on the exit side. If your customers are selling their crypto, whichever crypto it might be, and then asking for the funds to be wired or transferred to their bank account or card, well, if those proceeds were from illicit activities of any kind, whether that was on entry or during transaction, again, those funds are going to go to institutions, and because you're the one that's allowing the funds to go out, the banking partners and acquirers will need to make sure that you are thoroughly reviewing the transactions before they exit to the other fiat accounts. So these are the sort of expectations that the acquirers will have. In terms of liability, unfortunately, you're fully liable. You're fully liable on economic risk. So if there are any chargebacks or refunds, because you're the one accepting, you're liable for any type of money laundering and counter-terrorist financing that happens after deposit and before withdrawal as well. You're liable for the customers that you onboard because you're the ones that is essentially going out and acquiring the customers. So you're fully liable for all of that. And that's why a lot of VASPs don't end up surviving over the last sort of 10, 15 years, because they've not been able to manage holistically the AML compliance program, both on the fiat side and also on the crypto side. Now, in terms of sort of case studies, I tried to find only one, but there were so many. In fact, if you look at the last 5 to 10 years, the number of deregistrations and the number of delicensing across Europe, across North America itself is staggering. We're talking about in the hundreds of VASPs that lose connections and relationships with banks. They lose connections with their VASPs, or they are told by the regulator or FIU to remove themselves from the financial ecosystem. So I just can't find any specific example to really point out because I know that a lot of you here are compliance officers. Some of you might have worked in these institutions. And if you are, I don't want to sort of name, shame, or blame you because you probably tried your best and you just didn't have enough of the tools or knowledge. Hopefully going forward, we don't look back and we try to, you try to make sure that you don't commit the same mistakes. All right, so I just talked about, a lot of stuff here, broad stuff. Hopefully you guys caught most of it. Which is fine. We're going to now go into some really, really minute details. And all of these details matter more when you're talking about perspective. So how about this? MiCA, why don't you start with the VASP perspective?
Sure, and I will try to be as practical as possible because we work with many VASPs and I see their struggles, I see their problems, their requests. So I would say the first one is that sometimes people who work in VASPs, they come to us and they inquire our services, for example, KYT, screening of crypto transactions, and then they think that it's enough. It's KYT equals AML, anti-money laundering, that they are okay, they are fine with the law, with the requirements, and that's all that they need to do, which is in fact not, because AML, anti-money laundering, is a very broad terminology that includes a lot of other processes. KYT is only one bit of it, yes? Or for example, KYC, usually the standard package that all of the WASP starts, that they inquire KYT services, KYC services, and then they think they are all good in terms of the law, which is not, because it's only the start. There are also requirements to monitor transactions. So when the regulator will come to you, they will not only check how you onboard your customers and whether you screen crypto transactions, they will also ask questions, how do you monitor your transactions on risks, on high risk, whether the risk transaction is suspicious or not suspicious. How do you do your reporting suspicious transactions to the FIU, Financial Intelligence Unit? How do you store your data? What is your internal processes in place? Who is responsible for what? Whether you do trainings, how do you actually equip your employees with the knowledge and skills that are applicable and that is necessary for them to do a diligent jobs. And there are many other processes that WASP should take into consideration and should not only take, but also somehow organize the processes inside their companies. Also, what I see is that, of course, and it's understandable, whether it is if it's a WASP that just starts in their businesses, it's a small company with a limited resources, so they might not be able to afford a very good software, etc., to make everything automated. So I see that there is a big reliance on the manual processes, which might not be as effective as it would be some software that organizes the data, collects the data, maybe with some AI involved and produces some results or hints you how to take decision in this or that case. Also, what I see is that there is a big focus how to grow a business, and it's totally understandable because when there is a company, they first needs to earn money, yes, in order to understand whether they are profitable or not. And then after that, they only start focusing on the AML processes, on their AML requirements, which is totally fine from the business perspective. But you should not neglect also the fact that you are licensed. So you have a license. It means you have requirements before the regulatory authority to satisfy. And these requirements are not only KYC, KYT, but there is much more. So please take this into consideration, because you never know when you will have the inspection made by the supervisory authority, whether you're going to be fined or your license is going to be revoked. So please also take this into consideration. And since it's crypto is very volatile, so is law in crypto industry. Yeah, we see a lot of changes every year, new regulations, new guidance, etc. It's sometimes difficult uh, to monitor everything and to comply with everything, because there are so many coming in, but somehow you need to be flexible, and you need to also monitor, because maybe some of those regulations will be a key requirement that you will need to adjust your business. If you don't, then once you have the inspection, you might have some negative consequences. So basically, I understand why there is such a problem from WASP perspective, but there were some items that were hopefully helpful for you. And now let's dive into another perspective, TradFi perspective. Faisal, can you share that perspective? I know that you work with many TradFi institutions, so what are their struggles and problems?
Sure. Thanks a lot, Nico. Yeah, so most of our clients are TradFi clients. Only a few of our clients are VASP, but we're looking forward to obviously increasing that. What I tell our VASP clients who are integrating with our transaction monitoring software is I tell them it's helpful for you to understand why your banking partner's compliance officer, or your acquirer's compliance officer, or your BIN sponsor's compliance officer is acting the way that they are. And it might feel like they're acting very irrational towards you. They're being, just overly demanding in their requirements and things that you need to put in place. But let's sort of look at it from their shoes, okay? So if you're a VASP, one of the things you're able to do is you're able to look at some things such as the cryptocurrency origin. So you can see all the way from where it came, and you're able to follow cryptocurrency as well after. In contrast, your TradFi partner is just not able to do that, right? So a banking partner can only see the first or the last transaction it came from. So which other customer or bank or card did it come from, and it can only see one step ahead. It does not have the historical context backwards and forwards like you as a VASP compliance officer would have. So if you are sort of engaging with your banking partner, and we've had a VASP customer of ours interact with one of our banking customers, right? Because we sort of joined the transaction monitoring systems together. The VASP compliance officer had to sort of almost teach the banking compliance officer that, look, you're going to be reviewing my transactions. All you see is deposit and withdrawal, but I have access to information of where the deposit came from, where exactly did the coin come from historically. And I also have data to show where those coins are actually going, and you can keep following them as well. So the banking compliance officer gets more of a sort of a comfort knowing the provenance and also the purpose of the transaction. So they have limited understanding of these risks. The next limited understanding they have is cybersecurity, right? The biggest risk to the cryptocurrency industry is not money laundering. The biggest risk is actually cybersecurity. So every single VASP, past, future, and present, gets completely attacked on an ongoing basis. Why? Because if, for example, they are storing hot wallets or even cold wallets, they try to attack either their systems or even the people in phishing manners just to be able to have access to it. So cybersecurity is by far the biggest risk. And a lot of times, banking compliance officers don't notice that. They assume that the liquidity risk, economic risk, fraud risk, and AML risk is the biggest, but it's not. It's actually cybersecurity risk that's the biggest one for VASP. So what they do is they don't spend so much time reviewing these cybersecurity frameworks that these VASP have. So that creates a little bit of an issue, because here you have this VASP who's invested a ton of money in the cybersecurity part because that's where its biggest risk is, but it sort of gets overlooked. So these are sort of some of the limited understandings they have. Now, another perspective you should see from the TradFi is whether you are with a banking partner or acquiring partner, they don't have integrations with the different systems you have as a VASP. You as a VASP will have an integration with, for example, the AML bot for doing on-chain monitoring, right? But your banking partner doesn't have that integration, right? So they don't see the exact thing you're seeing. Luckily, one of the things we do between AML bot and ourselves is, so we have VASP customers that integrate with us for their TradFi transactions and what we call fiat monitoring, and they integrate with AML bot so that they do the on-chain monitoring. So at least they get both of those together. They see the full picture, and their banking partner's compliance officer can see that they see the full picture. So these are some of the things we're hoping to sort of fix in the space, because this type of integration just doesn't exist. It's very much one system and another. It's not sort of together and holistic. So that's super, super important, and you should know that this lack is there. Another thing is that banking compliance officers don't have a full understanding also of the nuances of blockchain analytics, right? And Nico is going to spend a little bit more time in a few minutes also talking about how his firm does on-chain monitoring. And a banking compliance officer doesn't sort of understand most of it. He's so busy with all the different AML and CFT risks that he encounters on a daily basis that for him to understand another type of money laundering transaction monitoring on-chain is like way too much work for what he needs. I mean, think about it. If you look at global money laundering, right, in terms of sort of percentages or volume, there is a ton more money laundering per dollar amount, right, in traditional financial institutions. However, the proportion of money laundering on total financial flow in the fiat space is extremely small compared to, for example, in the crypto space, where the number of illicit funds per total crypto illicit funds is much higher. So you can see how a banking compliance officer will see it as an elevated risk to take a closer look at. Another sort of TradFi perspective I can also provide is there are certain strategies to be able to identify these blind spots that I talked about. So that's whether that's technology-based, whether that's risk-based, whether that's liquidity or other types of protection-based. But the best mitigation for all of this is training, conversations like we're having here, exchanging a lot of information. So one thing I can tell you is that a lot of the compliance officers of our customers, they enjoy a lot of the ongoing training. And I know that some of our banking compliance officers are actually in the attendee here. So hopefully they're either it's because they've got a VASP client or they're looking to integrate with a VASP. So hopefully they can get some more information out of it. Now that's a lot of terms, and I've used holistic, quite a bit. So let's get really into the nitty-gritty. Let's talk about what exactly on-chain monitoring is, which is what AML Bot does, right, Nico?
Correct. And maybe also to add to the previous topic, that we also have cases where if there is a business that work with crypto and with fiat, they also come with a request that they need transaction monitoring. In most of the cases, they understand only crypto transaction monitoring, but as Faisal mentioned before, and what the Faisal company is doing is actually also provide the monitoring for fiat transaction, because it's also the risk that you need to consider and to address. Okay, but let's start with the on-chain transaction monitoring. Most of the VASP, if not all, does it in some sense, so it's okay, but there are some differences. So, of course, all of you might know that every crypto transactions can be screened against AML risks. So every transaction will have some score or some result, whether it is trusted transaction, suspicious transaction, or dangerous transaction, meaning there is a high risk in such a transaction. So the cryptocurrency might be related to some illegal criminal activity. So I call it as a risk scoring based method. But at AML Bot, we did one extra mile, and now it's also possible not only to check transaction based on the risk scoring, which is okay, but also configure your own alerts that are very particular to the business that you are doing, or there is some risk that you would love to monitor and not to miss, now you are able actually to do this. So I will try to explain how does it work. For example, there is no rules, there is no guidelines. What's the percentage of the danger signals in the transaction is acceptable, yes? But what we see in the market that if there is, for example, only 2-3% in the transaction that belongs to the danger indicator signals, usually it's acceptable. Every crypto exchange, VASP, accepts such deposit of their customer. There is no problems and it's fine. But let's just imagine that there is one customer who does a big volume of transactions, and for example, danger indicator signal sanction is only 1, 2, or 3%. So each transaction will show you this. Usually you accept it without any more questions asked. But if there will be a lot of such transactions, and each transactions will have this 2 or 3% of sanctions, accumulated amount of such sanctions or any other danger signal will be huge. And that's actually the risks that you would need to address, or you would need to know that is going on with such a customer. So how you can do it? Now you can also do it with AML Bot. You can configure your own alerts. What alerts are considered to be low for you, medium, suspicious, or that are severe, meaning that you do not want to work with such transactions. And when your customer will be doing such transactions and the portion of it will be the same as the rules that you set up for your business, these transactions will be alerted, and then your compliance specialist will need to dig into it and to understand whether there is indeed some suspicions, and maybe you will need to report such a transaction to FIU, or everything seems reasonable and can be disregarded. So now there is such a possibility as well at AML Bot, and I think it will provide even more effective management of transaction monitoring for VASP, because now even there is someone who wants to make something illegal and he is aware about that this, for example, VASP accept transaction with only 3 or 4% of danger indicator. The accumulation of it, he will not be able to actually somehow avoid. So I think it's an effective tool now for CASP or for businesses that work with cryptocurrencies, crypto assets. And of course, if a customer will have a lot of transactions that are considered to be high-risk transactions or severe transactions, this can also have some impact on the general risk scoring of the customer. So because let's not forget that it's a separate risk scoring that is going on in transaction monitoring, on-chain transaction monitoring. Yes, the transaction can be high, medium, or low risk, etc. But you as a company will need also to do risk scoring of all of your customers, and the customer will have his own or her own risk score. So of course, if the customer is low risk, but when you look at on-chain transaction monitoring, and there are many transactions that he does which are high risk, which are medium risk, this might actually impact his general risk scoring, and also you will need to increase your risk level from low to medium or from low to high based on the situation that you have with such a customer. So basically that's what we now do at AML Bot. I know that Faisal, you also work with SWAP and you also work with Threat5. So how do WASP and Threat5 work with you in order to manage their AML program?
All right, thanks a lot, Nico. Yeah, so our primary customers are TradFi institutions, but we also have VASP customers. And as you rightly pointed out, one of the things that VASPs require is not only on-chain monitoring that they do with AML Bot, but they also require what is known as fiat monitoring. So monitoring for all the different layers of transactions that they have with their banking partners and acquirers. So what they do with us primarily is that they need to not only onboard their customers, but also risk assess them. Depending on the jurisdictions, that risk assessment needs to be daily and updated. So they enter the parameters and the variables of the different risk assessment, and they're alerted anytime any of the activities of the customers, both on the KYC stage or transaction stage, go off of profile, and they're alerted to take a closer look at it. A lot of our VASP and TradFi customers also engage in banking transactions, card transactions, SEPA, SWIFT, all variety. Some of our African-based customers engage in sort of mobile payments as well. And so they design different scenarios to monitor for all these transactions as well, because their banking partner requires them to monitor also for all types of AML and CFT issues. So they integrate directly with us as well. And so anytime any of these alerts pop up, they'll be able to take a closer look. Now, depending on the jurisdiction also, one of the things that you might be required to do either as a VASP or a VASP and TradFi customer is that you'd have to do persistent monitoring, meaning that you'd have to have that monitoring happen on an ongoing daily basis. So myself as an ex-compliance officer, several years back, I knew one of the things is that I didn't have the ability to do daily monitoring because it was quite expensive, and there wasn't a setup ready to be able to allow me to do sort of daily AML screening. I sort of had to choose between doing it once a month or once a quarter or once a year, because doing it more than that would just cost a lot more. So one of the things we've done in our team is that we've made persistent monitoring, daily AML screening, exactly the same fee, one flat fee for the entire year. So if you choose to on-go monitor your customer, whether that's once a year or once a day, it costs exactly the same. And the reason why that's super, super important is because when you're interacting with also VASP elements and you're in the TradFi space, you can't wait a month before reviewing the risk, right? That risk is happening almost live and instantaneously. For an ML compliance officer, they need to be alerted at the time of event rather than at the time of payment. So that's why we sort of insisted on having persistent monitoring as part of the offering. Transaction screening is super important. As you know, some VASPs will engage in international wires, right? Where the sender and beneficiary maybe are not inside of the same country. So if you have any type of cross-border or international payments, the sender and the beneficiary details need to be also screened. And if your transaction is using SEPA or SWIFT or anything like that, you might need to know the sender and beneficiary screening, and you might need to complete that to make sure that obviously it passes all your screening results. So we also have transaction screening to help the VASP compliance officers and the TradFi compliance officers maintain sort of a nice cohesive program there. And then finally, if you are a VASP compliance officer, you get alerts from AML Bot for on-chain monitoring alerts. You get alerts from our software for any type of transaction monitoring alerts with banking or card transactions. Well, now you have those two elements together, and that allows you to do really great investigation, because now your investigation is fully holistic. You're looking at the banking transaction that is tied to the on-chain transaction as well. Because you're able to do a holistic investigation looking at both pieces of this picture at the same time, it allows you also to do really good FIU reporting. So for some of the jurisdictions, Lithuania example, Cyprus, and a few other jurisdictions, we already have the formatting done so that a compliance officer can directly make the reports to the FIU. That is super helpful because, as you can imagine, building out the report itself, you have to take the narrative from different systems, right? You have to see what was in the investigation, what was in the actual different softwares, and put them together into a SAR and STR and then file it. So we help our compliance officers put all of those together, and that's super important. So whether you are using us in partnership with AML Bot or anyone else, you need to make sure that you've got these five sort of elements as part of your tech stack or your AML tech stack. So you need to make sure that you can do onboarding and risk assessment that is almost dynamic and daily. You need to make sure you can monitor transactions that are bank transactions, card, SEPA, SWIFT. You need to make sure that you can do persistent monitoring as well on a daily basis. screen senders and beneficiaries if they are non-crypto related transactions. Then you can do investigations of any type of the alerts that happen, and then you can report also on a timely manner. So make sure your tech stack includes all of this. Right now, I know there are not many solutions in place that combine both of those, but we know that AML Bot and us, we do it together so that this happens seamlessly for you. But whichever the case, we're trying to make sure that this is more of an educational seminar than it is sort of like a selling one. But whoever you have or whoever you go with, make sure you've got these items in place. Okay. Now, that being said, speaking the fact that I talked about training, that's really the most important part of getting good at what you need to do to have a robust compliance program, right? Whether it's a founder, AML officer, investor. So I know, Nico, you're sort of like an expert in this area, and that's something that you sort of help a lot of VASP and compliance officers with. Tell me about trainings and how does that work and why is that important?
Yes, sure. So me myself having different experiences being in-house, being lawyer in a law firm. Then I was working in a bank in the AML department. Then I was as an AML auditor working for Big Four and auditing the biggest bank, investment funds, insurance company. And now I'm an in-house lawyer at AML Bot. We have many clients who are just startups or medium-sized companies, and sometimes they do not have the knowledge or experience, so they come to us, and we actually develop two kind of trainings that we provide now. One is general about AML, so we talk about what is the general AML requirements, that regardless where you are incorporated, you will need to set up in your company to be compliant at least with FATF recommendations. So I think it's a very good starting point. And another one, which is about blockchain analytics. Since we are a blockchain analytics company, of course, when you give a software to a client and they see this risk scoring, they see the screen of transactions, they have many questions. What does this mean? Whether it's okay, whether it's acceptable to work with such transactions, whether it's acceptable to work with such a customer if he does such transactions. So basically, we developed a second training, which is fully about blockchain analytic as an industry, because it's an industry now. It's very quickly developing, new things evolving, and we presented to our client, describing them what is blockchain analytics, what is know your transaction means, how it works, how it's calculated the risk scoring, what impacts the risk scoring. Also about crypto investigations that we also do on daily basis. We have many victims that come to us and they ask us to help them to trace the funds. So we have the experience, we share it with our clients. So basically, we try also not only to provide the software, but also to provide the knowledge to our clients so they can also use it in the best and the most effective ways. And I see we are approaching to the end. Is there anything else, Faisal, that your team are currently working on?
Sure. I mean, the kind of customers that come to us are usually sort of TradFi, but also VASPs. The reason they come to us is because they need fiat monitoring, either to satisfy the MiCA application that they're undergoing, or they come to us because they need fiat monitoring to satisfy the requirements from their banking partner or acquirer. So that's generally how they sort of use us. And I know that we work on sort of common customers, the customers that use you for on-chain and they use us for fiat monitoring. So that's very exciting, and we're always excited sort of improving that on an ongoing basis. But one of the things we're super excited about that we're working on is, we think that our thesis is that over the next few years, most of financial institutions, or the form factor of a financial institution, will be mostly an agentic one. What that means is that most of the operations and analysis will happen by basically AI agents, highly specialized AI agents. Now, if you think of that in the context of a compliance officer or a financial institution, you can imagine that the AML analyst is pretty much an agent, right? It's going to be doing the onboarding by itself. It'll be decisioning the alerts by itself, and it'll be disposing the alerts as well, and then pushing the investigation to an AML officer who needs to be a human, because that's, from a regulatory point of view, absolutely need that. So one of the things we're working on now is we're developing an AML product for sort of TradFi institutions and also VASPs, which is purely agentic, meaning that you can implement the system where the alerts are generated for you, and essentially AI agents that are specialized in either screening or monitoring are going in and taking care of those alerts, disposing them right away, or escalating them to the compliance officer to take a look at. We're super, super excited about this. We're very much in the early stages, but we're working with some of our customers and really implementing some of their already practices so that they don't have to hire new human analysts. They can essentially just deploy AI agents and work on it. So we're excited. We're super bullish on an agentic future. We think that most systems are going to round down to being fully agentic. So from an AML and anti-money laundering point of view, we want to develop technology that adapts well to that agentic future. So this is pretty much sort of what's on the cutting edge that we're working with. But on an ongoing basis, we keep improving our system for general fiat monitoring and transaction monitoring for our banking customers, VASP customers, and so on.
Sounds pretty cool. Yeah, AI is the future.
Right. Sorry, we were about to say something at the same time. I just wanted to remind everyone to send in your questions. If you have some, this would be a great opportunity for, those questions to be addressed. And also by you asking the question, you might help out someone else who may need that answer. So feel free to drop them in the chat or in the Q&A box. Alternatively, if you missed the opportunity to ask the question or you're not quite sure where you stand just yet, after the webinar, we will also send you a link to a form that I can see Dima has posted here. And we can take those further on a separate occasion and answer your questions that way. So thank you very much, Faisal and Nico. This is so insightful.
Yeah. So let's see whether there are any questions coming up. Okay, someone sent me a question through DM. So I'll ask that question. Maybe it'll give others the opportunity to ask a question. The question was, what are the system requirements and AML adjustments I need in order to be able to secure and maintain an account with my banking partner or acquiring partner? Okay, so the answer is very, very long, and there's a lot of things. But if you want me to go through sort of the bullet point list that you would need, first, like Nico said, obviously you need to be in line with the regulatory frameworks. So have AML policies in place and procedures and trainings, and we all know that. From a system point of view, you want to have an on-chain monitoring partner. So obviously, I would only recommend AML Bot, but obviously they're not the only ones. They know that as well. But AML Bot would be a great recommendation for your on-chain monitoring. If you want to maintain compliance with your banking partner, then they would recommend a fiat monitoring provider. And of course, we would recommend ourselves. That way you have both of those together. I would also recommend that you have some type of way of looking at the alerts from both systems in a unified way. That's one. And that you have your compliance officers, analysts tune in for these types of sort of holistic trainings on an ongoing basis. That is what will keep you really well updated. On a personal basis, I started as a compliance officer. My first compliance officer role in cryptocurrency was, like I said, almost 11, 12 years ago. And since then, there's been, hundreds and hundreds of different other VASPs that have come and gone. And over the last 2 years, almost 400 different VASPs across Europe have gotten deregistered or completely shut down, and thousands around the world as well. Now, they keep coming up and there are more VASPs, which is exciting to see. Now, if I was to sort of take a rank order statistics point of view, about 70% of you won't survive, meaning that 70% of you won't have a compliance program that will be fit for business, and will be either asked to deregister or won't find a banking partner. And I don't want to see that happen, right? I've seen a lot of that happen over the last 11 years, and I really don't want to see more VASPs get deregistered. So I really implore all of you there that are in the VASP space and compliance officers, please take the time to make sure that you invest well and make sure you've got the right systems and trainings and policies in place, procedures as well. Ask questions to Nico, myself, and others as well, how to make sure that you survive your relationship as a VASP, your relationship with your banking partner, or your acquirer and whatnot. just so that you can continue Satoshi's dream of transitioning from a sort of fiat past to a crypto future. So it's really up to all of you guys how you manage that information, what you do with it. Okay.
I also see another question, and I think it might be interesting for us. There is a question, do you have local EU license for compliance services? I guess the question is about whether we as a AML providers are required to have any kind of licenses. And I think from our point of view, AML Bot, we are not required to have any licenses. And the other questions that I usually ask our clients, whether we are DORA compliant. So there is a new regulation DORA, and to some extent it will apply also to the third-party service provider, which AML Bot and ComplyTech are. So just interesting to know from you, Faisal, did you do analysis of your businesses, whether you will be considered as a significant third-party service provider, so you will need to comply with DORA or not? Because we did initial analysis at AML Bot, and so far for the services we are providing, KYT, KYC, we will not be as considered to be as significant, but let's see what the practice will tell.
Yeah, so obviously this was for front and center for us. In our analysis as well, we do not require to sort of have compliance with DORA just yet. Our customers, however, absolutely need to. So they had to make adjustments internally, and then we had to sort of add also a few other systems on our end to essentially integrate with them. In some countries, some of our customers require us to have a separate type of registration or sign off. So, for example, in Luxembourg, one of the things our customers need is a type of attestation of what our services are, meaning that we're a technology service provider, yes, but we are outsourced technology service provider. We are not part of the customer determination, and so as a result, our Luxembourg customers can sort of use us, and it doesn't require extra licensing. Our customers in Lithuania, they are required by law to notify the regulator, and the regulator has 1 month to be able to sort of come back with a response, because it is considered an essential service, and the regulator has to sort of give them a yes or no that, okay, I understand this provider you're using and why they're using it, and sort of they give them a overall assessment of it. So it depends on sort of countries. From our end, it's really ISO 27001 is what we're looking at in terms of compliance. For all of our customers, we have monthly reports on any type of uptime or any type of reliability issues that happen. So that's generally how we operate on an ongoing basis and what our customers ask from us.
Okay, I think that question was asked, like how they can check, or whether they can be sure that the service they are receiving is of a good quality. Okay, so I do not see any more questions.
Okay, we've also approached the time. Oh, last minute question. Can you demonstrate so Marat is asking, can we demonstrate the effectiveness of the checks, and how much do the checks themselves match the checks of the exchange, for example? This can easily be demonstrated on any blocker assets. Thank you.
I guess it's a question to me, since we are providing AML checks, meaning we screen crypto transactions, or maybe it's also for you, Faisal, maybe I'm mistaken. But about the KYT, know your transactions, how you can demonstrate, that's true. That the crypto exchange can have same or different results from us. It depends whether the crypto exchange use our services or someone else services, yes, because the KYT service providers, there are many in the market. At AML Bot, what I can tell that we use 3 different databases, so we try to provide as much comprehensive result as possible, so the results would not be different from the biggest KYT service provider, or maybe even close to the same one. So you should be safe with us. But of course, if there are many service providers, if this crypto exchange use another service provider, then the results might be different, and it's totally okay. I can tell you even more than the biggest, the most popular one, centralized crypto exchanges in the market, they usually deploy 2 or 3 KYT service providers. So whether there is some suspicion, they try to use 3 service providers, see the results over there. So it will give them more information about the transaction and whether this transaction is indeed suspicious, or maybe there is one service provider considered it as suspicious, another one is totally okay. So then I think compliance officer need to look at another data, apply holistic approach, not only crypto, but take the data about the customer, his KYC, his past transactions, to decide whether there is still some reasonable suspicion or there is not, and the case can be closed.
Yeah, so for us, it actually is not an issue that comes up, and I'll explain why. So we are integrated with multiple different list providers. So whether that's the LexisNexuses or LSEG or WorldCheck or wherever. So we are integrated with multiple of them. Our VASP customers also are using us for integrating with their TradFi partners. However, the algorithm for the false positive and true positive comes from us, so it's single source. Hence, we give the same results to both parties at the same time. So both the TradFi partner and the VASP are going to get the exact same alert, because no matter what list you're using, the classification and the false positive or true positive alert comes from us, and that's how we go about it. Initially, about 3-4 years ago, before AI was popular, we actually had our screening optimized using sort of AI. So the most common one is a combination of XBoost gradients, a few SVMs as well, to be able to make sure that our false positive alerts and true positives are as good as possible. So we don't have that problem because the same alert is sent to both parties, the VASP and the TradFi, so they don't have to worry about differing alerts.
Okay, thanks very much for answering these questions. Guys, I think we should stop it right here because we are past the time, and we want to make sure we're not holding people up. As I mentioned earlier, we will send you the follow-up email just to have that open line of communication. If you do need any help or assurance or assistance, please let us know. We'll be more than happy to assist, because as Faisal mentioned, it's just so sad to see folks going out of business because of these issues that could have been prevented. So yeah, thanks for your time, everyone. Hope you found this insightful, and hopefully see you in the next webinar.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Have a nice day.